All right, what up, dudes? I think I start every video saying what up, dudes. Okay, well, we're going to break down, it's your boy over here. I think, honestly, the only reason I wanted to do this, because the video angles were relatively similar. And there's a lot of things that Scherzer does, little things that I don't think people really take into consideration, and then obviously the major things that he does that are very apparent, right? So I'm literally going to do this screening comparing myself to Scherzer and literally call out. I just said literally twice in the same kind of sentence. I'm delirious. All right, we're going to call out every single thing that I see differently, okay? And then talk maybe in brief about how this could potentially benefit, potentially not. So, first thing, foot positioning. Scherzer's right side, Johnny. I'm left side in this particular video. I actually switch my foot positioning from time to time just because I love deviation. That's in different throws, different arm angles, different tempo, even like stuff like this, because I'm constantly intentionally training like adaptation, right? I'm training adaptation for my body to essentially like constantly rely on athleticism to complete tasks. Not saying that that's a great theory. Not saying it works great. I'm not in the big leagues. I'm not as successful as a guy like Scherzer, but that's kind of just my approach. Now, I do apologize. As you see, there's a little pad I in the way of my front foot, but that is a segue into the very next thing, is the lead leg and the foot posture of both. Now, you see me, I have this kind of preset, for some reason, dorsiflexion of my foot, whereas Scherzer's got a little downward angle. I will say that this could potentially cause some mechanical breakdowns. Now, how is that? Well, if you're in dorsiflexion, you're going to lack, well, I don't know from an anatomical standpoint if that's actually true as far as lacking like hip flexion, because I know in the past, before I took mobility really serious, that I always had this dorsiflexion here of that foot, the toe going up, and little restriction of hip flexion. So what happened was my trunk would compensate very minimally by making way to get to this peak leg lift, okay? So what happened as a byproduct is if my trunk was kind of compensating to make way, then as I got into this drive, my drive phase, I used to have this, this move from back to then forward, right? So lift, back, go back with the trunk, and then come down as in forward in trunk flexion, and then kind of I would be off alignment from where I initially started, right, as a compensation. So if you are someone that struggles maybe with a little bit of hip flexion mobility, see if pointing the toe down could help with that. But, you know, just something that I have personally struggled with. Now, in the very next thing, so again, I guess one more thing in this view is you see that I actually look down, whereas Scherzer's setting sights on the target pretty much the whole way, right? Maybe a little bit because he goes over the head, but right here he's got his target, right? And his toes are up right here too, so I didn't realize that. The reasoning behind why I do this with sights is, again, I'm constantly relying on athleticism. I actually think that, you know, depending on the individual, that it could benefit you by looking at the target the whole time, or if you are a guy like me who maybe could put too much emphasis on like the sights that maybe causes some internal pressure, look away. The analogy I use is when I play catch, if I leg lift and then look at like the target, I'll have my catch partner often say like, hey, don't give me a target until I'm dropping into my drive phase. And I, more often times than not, I hit that target. Because why? Because your body is, if you're an athlete, like you don't have to think. right? So sometimes when we are constantly like looking at the target, we're either consciously or subconsciously thinking about, got to put the ball there, got to put the ball there, got to put the ball there. And then what happens more oftentimes than not is there's a physical kind of restriction buildup. It's a physical restriction because you're putting so much mental emphasis on like where the ball needs to be going. Whereas for me, I'm chilling, dude. I'm not putting a whole lot of emphasis on that. I mean, I have my visualization set on where it's going, but if you really break it down, I've been throwing a ball for freaking 20 plus years of my life. Like, I have a pretty good clue of how to do it, right? So now, kind of going into the next phase of this, you're going to see something that Scherzer does extremely well, that is another one of those things people don't really consider, is watch his hand separation in relation to his lead leg dropping into his dry phase. He's actually going to hide his hand, hide the ball as he drops his leg. So if you're a hitter, this is something Pop's always told me, like, for some reason, can't really explain it from the hitter standpoint, but if you see the ball, if you see the white in the box, there's a sense of comfort there because you see the ball. Now you can track, right? Now you can track that timing of it. I think this was a problem my last outing specifically because I was getting friggin' hit around. If you guys haven't checked out that breakdown of my last outing, go do so on my YouTube. But you'll see that he hides the baseball with his lead leg, right? Now for me, I don't. I delay hand separation, and then I separate, and it's right there. And I know the angle can't really do it justice, but if you're hitting, you're seeing white, right? You're seeing the ball. It's out in the open, okay? Doesn't matter if you're a terrible hitter or a good hitter. If you have eyes, like you're seeing that, and you're not seeing that because it's blocked. So, and just another thing. Now, so we both drop. Again, I talked about me delaying the hands. I actually like have this kind of timing motor control mechanism with the way that my hands work. I like going out with my hands. I've always done that ever since like Little League. Whereas Scherzer, he has the ability to drop his throwing hand and keep that glove arm stagnant. Whereas I like movement. Okay? So now he's going to drop. And he's throwing a changeup, so it could be different. He could be just thinking, like, get the ball out early. So now let's pause it there. So you're already seeing two different things, right? So the way his glove arm works is going to be a little bit different. In my opinion, his glove arm is going to work because of his actual throwing arm slot. It's going to be a lot lower than mine. Whereas mine's like over the top, so more oftentimes than not, my glove arm gets a little bit more elevated. Now, the obvious difference is, the hand path. Now that I'm thinking about it, these aren't similar angles at all, huh? Because I was thinking that this Scherzer video was like to the side. I guess it is a little bit to the side, but it's more behind. So it's going to be different. But again, my hand path is going to be different than his. He's going to drop his down here and come out a little behind and then come up. But the obvious difference being the hand path. Now, we actually both have a similar, he does a way better job of holding and storing energy in that drive leg for a long period of time, whereas as I descend, like I do a good job of accepting that force and producing energy into the ground, but it starts going, right? And this could be in relation to how quick my hand path comes up, because if we're trying to time up the sequencing of that energy from the ground up through the kinetic chain, it's going to be a little bit different if your hand path is as short as mine. But so stick and move, Scherzer. Now you're going to see that he goes and he has that period of time in which he's delaying, and now boom, hip rotation into front foot strike. Boom, hip rotation into front foot strike. This is where the video is going to get a little bit off because the angles are so off. But very similar in terms of the hip rotation. We both go into hip rotation relatively early, whereas if you watch like a guy like Garrett Cole, I think he does a lot better I guess it wouldn't be quantified as better or worse, but his hip rotation is a little delayed. Scherzer and I both kind of rotate this patella, if you will, down, resulting in this back foot going like this, right? Again, I don't even know if it's something that's it's one of those better or worse type things. I guess it is just what it is. You see some guys that have extremely high power output that will actually just eversion of the ankle, and take this knee down here without really like coiling over, if you will. Okay, into front foot strike, and we both have similar, arm action in regards to 90 degrees. He's got that different arm angle, so his elbow is going to be below his shoulder. Mine's, I would say, a little bit below, I guess more in line, and front side, very similar. I also believe that the way you set up on the rubber, now this only really is in consideration if it's drastically far right or drastically far left, but I think the hip rotation, that whole dynamic is going to be, I guess, compensated would be the word. Like for me, looking at Scherzer, I think since he is far right, knowing he has to then, with his arm angle out here, he's got to hold on to the ball. So I think that's why his hip rotation goes early, because he has to, right? Because he is far right. I think for me, I just have early hip rotation. All right, now we both have a very similar, dynamic of pulling the arm through, right? So hip rotation gets completed, the trunk rotation then gets completed while the arm is then pulled through by the trunk rotation, whereas you see me here do the same thing, whereas I come down, trunk is in a pretty much neutral posture where the hips aren't. We see the back foot, it's going, and now it's going to be pulled through. The one major difference is obviously when we both come through, his plane of rotation is going to be drastically different than mine, right? If you watch, see how I elevate that elbow. I wish this was slow-mo. I also lack a ton of external rotation of the shoulder. It's hard to see in this video of Scherzer. And then going to ball release, slots are drastically different, so you're going to see me have this kind of contralateral tilt, whereas Scherzer, he's going straight into his target. His head posture stays neutral. Mine's, again, being pulled from the tilt. He's got a little bit more hip flexion. Well, he's got a little bit more hip flexion going forward. Whereas mine, I'm just a very minimal flexion. And is that it? There's a lot here that's the obvious difference, because I think the arm angle is really going to determine a lot. Him being more out to the side, me obviously being way up here. I would say the one big thing is the front foot placement. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Scherzer comes down a little bit tilted or a little bit closed off with that lead leg, but otherwise, great job, lead leg block. And then my finish is way better. Yeah, that was a long video for basically a video I thought was going to take like 5 minutes. But knowing me, I freaking talk more than anyone I've ever met. So, yeah, I have a ton of more ton more videos on Scherzer. If you want more explanation on that, the whole hip rotation dynamic, I do have a video specifically on Max Scherzer and his hip rotation. You can find that on the YouTube. But without further ado, love you guys. God bless. See you.